JT Crowley is Talking Books. On the show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world.
Hello, I'm JT Crowley. I'm the host of Talking Book Show on Web Talk Radio. And today I warmly welcome Lynn Slaughter from Kentucky in the United States of America to talk about two of her 7 books, 6 novels and 1 nonfiction. The 2 books we're going to talk about are her latest book, which is called Missing Mum, which she put out very early this year, and the other book is going to be Missed Q. So what are these books about? Well, I'm not going to tell you because I'm going to get Lynn to tell you. So let's invite her on the show to talk a little bit about herself, who she is, and why these books have come about. So Lynn, from Kentucky in the United States of America, come and join me on the show.
Thank you so much, John. I'm delighted to be with you and looking forward to our conversation.
It was a great pleasure, the conversations that we've had over the past few weeks. And when I first reached out to you several months ago, when I first looked at, your book, Mr. Q, I thought, this is so exciting. I need to get this lady on my show. And boy, am I right, everybody.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So Lynn, before we open the books, would you care to tell the audience a little about who you are and what are these books about?
Okay, I'd be glad to. Well, let's see. I'm a wife, a mom, a grandmother, a former dancer and dance educator, and I'm a late in life novelist. And that's a little bit about me. As for what my books are about, they are romantic mysteries. But I also think that ultimately my books are about hope and resilience in the face of some very daunting challenges. They really are about characters growing and maturing, and figuring out kind of how they can move forward with their lives despite some losses. In many of my books, another theme is the necessity of creating an intentional family of support when your own biological family of origin may not be able or willing to offer you the kind of loving acceptance and support that you need. So that's a little bit about what my books are about.
And I think she's absolutely nailed it, everybody, because that's what they are about. But there's more to it. There's more coming, everybody. So sit back and listen.
Mhm.
Now, Lynn, let's open Missing Mum
Mhm.
and explore the early part of the book. Now, there are 62 chapters here, everybody. They're very short chapters. And if you think we're going to go into all of these chapters, you're wrong. We're not. That's not the purpose of the podcast interview. The purpose is to give you an inkling, a sample, an intrigue as to what this book is about. So we're going to look at some areas of the book, enough to give you a chance, an opportunity for thinking, I really must get this book, because you really must, everybody. So I want to go, as I said, to the first 3 chapters. They're powerful chapters. And when I looked at the opening scene here, we've got a dance studio, and immediately you introduce us to Noel, one of the 2 main characters, and Ravi, who I would stipulate is a kind of a boyfriend or really good friendship. Now, Noel receives a message from Mrs. McAllister that her mum has failed to turn up at Noel's younger sister Whitney's camp school. This is unusual for her mum to miss collecting Whitney. So in Noel's mind, alarm bells are coming into play. And there are all sorts of connotations racing through Noel's head. And Noel, she starts to panic a little bit because she can't raise any members of the family until eventually her dad, that is her biological father, phones her. things happen, and she does report her mother missing to the police. So, Lynn, my question is, there's lots going off in this early part of the book, these three chapters. So would you care to tell the audience what's cracking off here? Why these characters? Why the setting? And why a story of this nature?
That's a great question. I think first off, I was interested in a setting that I could really relate and connect with. So it's not very surprising that I would have chosen a protagonist who was a young person who was very passionate about dance, which turned out to be something I was very passionate about and something I could connect with and knew something about. In terms of what happens and what the significance is in these first three chapters, in writer's speak, you have the introduction of the inciting incident. You present this person's normal world, and there she is, she's in dance class, she's having a good time, she's hanging out with her best friend Ravi, whom she loves, and she's enjoying dancing, and suddenly you get this idea that there is something not right. And you also get the idea that her mother clearly was seemingly a very devoted parent. This is totally out of the blue for this woman not to show up to pick up Noelle's younger sister. So you're sort of introduced to all these principal characters immediately, and also what the story problem is. The story is her mother is gone, and there's a tremendous sense of isolation that she experiences. She can't reach her stepdad, she can't reach her mother, her father's away on a business trip, so he can make a few phone calls, but he's not a great deal of help, and there she is having to go down by herself to the police station to make a missing persons report. At the same time, you do get the idea that Ravi is genuinely a good friend. He is there to support her and help her. And so, although at this point they are not a romantic couple, you certainly get the idea that they are very close friends. So that's a little bit about why it's really setting up what is to come in those first three chapters.
Of course, Noelle wasn't really taken seriously by the police because she was only 17.
Yes, yes, she's very young.
She's very young.
She's not stupid, and she's also quite determined. And this is a young adult novel. And one of the things about young adult novels is that the adults absolutely cannot solve the problems. It must be the proactive person who is the young person who solves the problems. And that's true in this story as well.
It is. But there's a twist to this book, everybody. There are two tales being spun together in this
Yes.
one book. There are two, and they are interlinked. And the other strong character is Savannah, and I will bring her in later. And that story is 19 years apart, but there is a link, but I'm not going to say why. Wait. So I think, Lynn, it's only right that we should give the audience an even spread of the chapters so they get a real flavour for what your book is about. So they can formulate their own opinions and they can get to enjoy the whole story. So I want to move on now, if you don't mind. I want to dash to chapters, the area of the book, 18 to 21. Now, these chapters, again, the story over these intense. They're short chapters, they're punchy, they're sharp, and they really do pack a good storyline. And in chapter 18, we've got Noel, we've got Maddie, we've got Ravi talking about relationships, as young kids do, young adults do. But Ravi is an Indian, everybody. And of course, his mom is talking about an arranged marriage. Doesn't sit well with Ravi. And we've got dance routines, and I love this character, Marlene. She's really good at her put down one-liners. And boy, does Lynn put them in. So we've got the one-liners. And, chapter 19 to 21, we have the character Hank Burrows, who appears to hold a grudge against Noel's mother being Joanna Myrtle. This situation is a turn up for the books, isn't it, Lynn? So I'm asking you, where are you taking the reader with the storyline in these chapters, on this part of the book? What journey are you taking us on? Where are you gonna go with this?
That's a great question, John. I think one of the things about writing a mystery
Mm.
is that you have red herrings. You have all kinds of suspects who are possibilities. And she has begun her investigation. She's gone to talk with her stepfather's colleague to see if something might have been going on there. And she's gone to talk with her mother's co-worker. And now she is confronting a boy at her mother's college who was quite bitter toward her mother because she turned him in for plagiarizing a paper, and that threatened the possibility of his getting a scholarship to UMass to go on for a four-year degree. So what she's doing here is she's trying to figure out what happened to her mother, and she's grasping at all these straws. And it's actually Robbie, her friend, who says, well, what do you really know about your mother's background? And he says, and then she says, well, she doesn't want to ever talk about her background. And he said, don't you think that's a clue right there? And he really, it's a turning point for her because she says, oh, yeah, you're right. I better look at what happened to my mother before I knew her. Since her coworker had mentioned that, oh, she looked like she'd seen a ghost or something when she ran out of the college. And so it sort of takes her investigation into a slightly different turn.
Oh, it does. And you're starting to think, what was her mother's life?
Yes,
What happens in her mother's life? Is
right,
something coming from the past?
right.
Shh, don't give it away. Because Lynn weaves this plot, everybody, brilliantly. Now, Lynn, let's take the listener to another part of the book, the area around chapters 40 to 43. For I really want to focus on the second. I already said, everybody, there are two parallel stories running in this one book. And the second parallel story, which is 19 years earlier, is the character Savannah and her story. Now, I do note throughout the book, your chapters are head up Noel and some of them are headed up Savannah. And when you head up Savannah, you very clearly point out and you remind the reader 19 years earlier.
Mhm.
So, who is Savannah? Why are you running two parallel stories over a different time period? Why these characters? And was this hard to do, write and knit these two parallel stories and two characters together? And do you think it works?
Well, I hope so. I hope it worked. I guess my thought was that often what happened generations ago, or at least a generation ago, has reverberations into the present. So without giving too much away, I will say that Savannah's story turns out to be definitely related to Noelle's investigation and to the mystery of what happened to her mother. But I was very interested in Noelle's story as well, because I do think that she was a very bright, talented, academically gifted young woman who had earned a full scholarship to a college and then fell madly in love with this rather possessive, controlling, hotshot high school boyfriend and marries him. He really sweeps her off her feet, and she mistakes his possessiveness and so forth, and almost obsessive interest in her. She mistakes that for devotion. And that actually was inspired by personal experience I had where a very good friend had a high school boyfriend like this and married him and ended up the victim of abuse. So that story was very close to my heart. And I hope it works. I think it works. It was the first time, John, that I ever tried what's called a time slip novel, where you have
Yes.
these things happening. And it was a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I enjoyed working on it, and I felt very immersed in the lives of both of these characters. So it was not I didn't think it was a problem so much as I didn't know if it worked, but I think it did. I hope so.
I mean, to me, Noel and Savannah, they're 19 years apart, but the two women, they're strong characters,
Mhm.
coming with their own issues and trying to get different things out of their, to solve things out of their lives.
Right.
Um, and I think you've done it very cleverly, how you've blended these two young women together. And I think young women as a whole, when they read your story, can relate to these two characters
Mhm.
because you so warmly knit them together, yet they are very different.
Mhm. Yeah.
They have their own personalities.
Mhm.
Um, and it's like most of the book, again, you're drawing on your own experiences, like with Savannah, that storyline there. But I want to, says we've got 62 chapters in this book, everybody. Not going to go to the end because that reveals everything, and I'm not doing that. So what I want to do now, Lynn, is I want to go to another section of the book, which we agreed upon. And I want to go to the area of the book around the chapters 40 to 43. Now, I do notice that as the book goes on, the flip between Savannah and Noel, the the chapters alternate. So
Mhm.
once now we're getting deeper into the book, we've got Noel, and then you switch to Savannah, and then back to Noel, and switch to Savannah. So in this part of the book, where there are 4 chapters, 2 chapters are on Savannah, 2 chapters are on Noel.
Mhm.
Um, and I think you do this rather cleverly as you hip hop, you go back and forth. But what I want you to tell the audience is what's going on in this part of the book. Savannah and Josie, a cat story, Noel going to a shrink, the dance routines, the production cast of The Wistful Eye, and Savannah a driver's license.
Mhm.
Spill the beans. What are you telling here?
Well, in terms of Savannah, I'm telling a lot about friendship and the power of friendship, because ultimately Savannah realizes that she's really in trouble. She's in an abusive marriage and she needs to get out. And her friend, her very good friend Josie, helps her and has a family member who can help her get some fake documentation and lend her a little bit of money to get out of town and change her identity and yada yada. So one of my favorite lines is that she says to Josie how wonderful she is as a friend, and she says, because you never said I told you so. And I thought that really is friendship when you don't rub it in someone's face, because Josie had been telling her for a long time, you're being an idiot. This guy is trouble. You've given up a scholarship, yada, yada. And so their friendship, I think, is very touching. in terms of what happens in these next chapters, going back to Noelle, by this time, she and Ravi are a couple, and they're having this wonderful experience dancing together, and it's a great success, and they feel great. But then, da 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 da, his parents discover that they are involved, and of course, they are not happy about that. They really want him to marry a Hindu Indian American girl or an Indian girl, and they don't want him to marry somebody outside of their culture and religion and or become romantically involved with her. So then that's kind of the part where, you know, there's a bit of a black hole there. We're now in a terrible situation, which they are. And so that's kind of a dramatic moment in the book.
It is, because this part of the book, everybody, we've got the two characters, Noel and Savannah. They're in difficult situations of different, reasons.
Right.
Noel is because of Ravi's culture. It's really his mum who's the driving force behind this pre-arranged marriage and insisting that he doesn't get involved with Noel. And of course, Savannah in this, awful, controlling, abusive situation. So
Mhm.
it's this part of the book is really dealing with two women, the two young women, and the circumstances that they find themselves in
Yes.
and how they get out of it. But the
Mhm.
driver's license for Savannah is very, very significant, everybody. It's
Mhm.
like an escape card. It's the escape card for her. I'm right, aren't I?
Mhm. Oh, yes. I think the ability to be given a new identity
Yeah.
allows her to get away and
Mhm.
not be found for a long time.
So I find this book very gripping, everybody. I've read it, and that's why I go into so much detail when I'm discussing it with the authors, because I actually look at the book and read it. And this book is getting tenser, everybody. Lynn is up to no good here. She's twisting the story. But I'm not going to give it away.
Mhm.
Um, so now we've dangled that carrot, let's go to another section of the book and, the areas of around 50 to 53. We're
Mhm.
not going to 61, 62, everybody, because that gives the game away. If you want to see what those chapters are about, well, buy the book. Now, I find that the area of the book around chapters 50 to 53 very engaging. They're compelling. And for this is because I think this is you building up for the finale. It's a chain of events for both Noah and Savannah. You're hotting these characters up here. You're spinning a new yarn. You're doing your best here to tease the reader so that they go to the finishing line. So, as they say in Ireland, what's the crack here?
Mm.
What's the tale? What's the yawn? What's the crack in this part of the book?
I think she's getting, I think Noelle is getting closer here to figuring out uh, what in her mother's background could have led her mom to disappear. And she's being very, very proactive in trying to track down these leads about her mother's past. And she's getting very close to figuring out what in the world happened to my mom. So that's what I see there.
And we'll leave it there because, as I said, you want to find out more, you know what to do. Now, I said to you at the beginning of the interview, there's going to be two books. So we've done the first book, Missing Mum. We're now going to the second book. We're going to chat about Missed Q. So, Lynn, what's this book about?
This book is an adult mystery. It's actually the first adult mystery I've ever written. Most of my books have been for young adults. And the external plot is about a very puzzling case for a homicide detective. A revered ballerina has apparently failed to wake up in Act 3 of the final dress rehearsal of Romeo and Juliet. She is dead. The autopsy shows no apparent cause of death. And so Caitlin is faced with this very complicated case. She's pretty sure that somebody has done something to this ballerina, and the more she investigates, the more she realizes there are all of these people around the ballerina who had reasons to harm her.
Let me clear this up, everybody. Caitlin is the lieutenant detective.
Yes, she's the, or as you would say, the lieutenant. But in America, we call it the lieutenant, but she's the homicide detective. And she's
In the UK, we say lieutenant.
Yes. But she's not only trying to figure out, who harmed her, but how they did it. Because it's not an apparent cause of death. So it's a complicated case. But in addition to that, this detective has a rather messy personal life.
Oh, she does, everyone.
Some self-destructive habits. She has a terrible habit of getting involved with married men. And she's finally decided to go into therapy to figure out why she keeps doing this to herself. And so her story is also, even though she's in her late 30s, it's also a story of growing and maturing and figuring some stuff out about why she does, and how she can make some healthier choices for herself. So that's also what the book is about.
Okay, let's have a look at this book then. And I want to go to the first 2 chapters, which I found, very intriguing. You set the scene for the entire situation. We have a dead body. Yeah, the ballerina, Lydia Missot, who on the surface appeared to be liked by the majority of the theatre company. We've got the grieving husband, Victor Bezeski, the artistic director. And as I say in the United Kingdom, we've got the lieutenant, Caitlin O'Connor, lieutenant to you lot in the United States, and her deputy Stan, who both appear to have their own personal issues. Believe you me, Caitlin and Stan have got some serious issues, everyone. And so we're talking about here Victor Peteski's former life and Caitlin's. We're talking about hurtful relationships. We've got the relationship Caitlin is with the medical officer, Chet Roberts, married man. So my question is, Lynn, is you sure picked a variety of characters in your book, and most of them seem to have baggage, real baggage, attached to them. So I suppose my question really is to you is, why this ensemble of characters, the characteristics that you've given, and the opening scenes here, the opening shots?
I think that flawed people are more interesting. And there are a whole bunch of flawed people you're introduced to in the first chapters. Obviously, the homicide detective is very flawed. Her partner, Stan, clearly has a drinking problem. And also, you're introduced almost immediately into some of the people who will be suspects in this investigation of the death of this ballerina. Her husband, of course, as anybody can tell you, they always look first at the husband,
Oh, yeah.
He turns out to have some pretty good reasons to have gotten rid of his wife. And then you have the lighting designer, and it's clear there's some tension going on between the husband and the lighting designer. Then you have this lovely young understudy who's been waiting for years to get her chance to take the ballerina's roles over. And so so I think what I'm doing is setting the stage there introducing you to this world of all of these characters. All of them have issues and problems. So,
Oh boy, she does start this book off with a pile of problems with these characters. Um, but it's wonderful. It really grips you right from the start and it makes you want to find out more. And because that's what a good book needs to be. The introduction needs to be powerful, punchy, and grip you within the first chapter or two so that you want to look further down the line. No point in having a fantastic ending, is there, everybody, when you're not even going to get past the readers with the first two chapters. That's not what you want as an author. You want them to go through the whole lot. So, Lynn, so we've done the first bit here. So we've got the character, Chet Roberts, the medical officer, the married man, and Caitlin's getting involved there. And he's brushing her off now, realizing that the kids are important and probably cost him a lot of money to get out of his marriage. And we've got the character Stan, and we're starting to see Caitlin, all her issues. And of course, the cast of the theatre company, they're suspect. But I want to, Lynn, when I was reading the book, I can't but feel that there is a part of you in this book, and also a part of you perhaps in some of your other books as well. The characters and the storylines. And to prove my point, I'm in chapter 19, so I'm moving down the book here, everybody, where we have Caitlin and her mother. They are in a cafe and they're having a chat between the two. And this is, mum and daughter catching up with each other. And it's, Caitlin's sitting there talking about her problems and then her mum listening. And she reveals that, well, if she hadn't have got married, she would have perhaps, she would have loved to have done sociology and right up to a professorship. And when you look at Lynn's life and you look at the introduction, Lynn too took sociology, apart from dance and music as well. So I suspect that you build your characters, you strengthen them, and the storyline to your books through say, your own experiences. The music, your music, the jazz connection. And Melissa's itching to find out what's going on with the chat, with Caitlin and Hank, what happened there, all sorts of things. So am I right in saying that you draw on your own experiences to put some hints and tips to drive the book, to create the characters, to intensify the storyline? But where are you taking the reader here as well?
I do think that writers, including myself, take pieces of their personal experiences or experiences that others have shared with them or that they've witnessed, and they kind of mix it all up and put it into a blender, and it comes out in a different way. For example, Caitlin's father sent her the message that career women were superior to married women, even though he firmly expected his wife to stay home and take care of the children and firmly expected her to give up her career. I had a somewhat different experience, and yet now that you've mentioned it, John, I think it is more related than I even thought about at the time. But I did love sociology as my major. And in fact, when I was a senior in college, I received a scholarship to Harvard to pursue my PhD in sociology. And at the time, my father and my prospective in-laws were putting tremendous pressure on me to get married. I was supposed to get married And that was my father's dream, was that I would marry a man from a well-to-do, highly educated family, since he had grown up in abject poverty and wanted to devote his life to raising the standard of living of his family. So no one wanted me to do that. And being the pleaser that I was, I did marry and move to where my new husband was going to be and didn't take the scholarship at Harvard. So, yes, it was a little bit different, but it was the same idea of responding to messages, very strong messages I got from an extremely strong parental figure, my father, whom I admired tremendously. He's a very successful man, and I admired him greatly, but I'm not sure he was the healthiest parent in terms of really trying to listen to his children and address their needs and wants. So yes, I do think we take pieces of our experiences and we mush them up and change them around, but they're in there. Definitely, they're in there.
So can you briefly tell us what's going on in these chapters, 19 and 20?
19 and 20. Let me just look. I took some notes. Hang on, John. Let me just think. If she does, oh, yeah. Well, then, this is interesting because after she has this big talk with her mother, and then she goes out on this lovely date with Hank, new interest, new potential interest, a man who's actually available. He's single. He's
Not
very nice.
married.
He's not married.
He's not married, everyone.
She thinks, woo, but then she comes home and in the middle of the night, her married lover appears at her door and she breaks down and goes right back into sleeping with him again. And then the next day she feels horrible about herself. She knows that this is a kind of addiction and it's not healthy. And she's basically fallen into this trap again. So she really beats up on herself when she does that.
Yeah, this is the character, Chet Roberts. He's the one that came back onto the
Yes,
doorstep and she
a
just
married
can't.
medical examiner. Right,
Yes.
right.
I think he just picks her up and puts her down when he suits him. But we're not going there.
Yeah.
That could be another book, everybody. So let's go into the book further. Now, when I go further into the book and Mr. Q, I began to realize, Lynn, that there are many threads running in this book. Yes, we've got the investigation into the Lydia Missou saga and the characters of those linked to the theatre company, who some lead, as I think, different lives behind the scenes as opposed to the public face they put on, when they go on the stage or in their own theatre company at work. And then we've got the police, the procedural routines that you talk about, and all the characters associated with that aspect of the story. We've got the complexity of Caitlin. We've got Chet. We've got Hank. We've got Stan, etc. And we've got the ex-husband and a few other characters from the theatre company. So there's a lot of threads that you sew together to make this book. None so more than in chapter 33, where we have a conversation between Dr. Steen, Caitlin's therapist, about Caitlin, her entanglements with married men. And at the same time, she informs Dr. Steen about her suspicions of arresting the wrong man and the consequences that could come down the line. So, Lynn, I'm really asking you to talk us through what's going on in this part of the book and give us a snippet as to why chapter 32, which is so short, you have got the character Sarah Pazeski. She is a very significant figure coming down the line. Care to open up here to these chapters?
Well, with her therapy appointment, I think that it's very clear that Caitlin's identity is very caught up in being this crackerjack detective, highly thought of in her department. And now she is beginning to face the fact that maybe she's made a mistake. And that's very scary to her to, oh no, I'm going to be a failure in my career, which is really not true. She's not the first, as Dr. Stein tells her, you're not the first or the last detective to have ever made a mistake and had to regroup, so to speak, in an investigation. I think it does show too that she does have the right kind of character in that sense, because she's, of course, not going to try to cover this up and ram some some innocent person into prison to preserve her reputation. She is going to try to make it right, even though it doesn't make her look good. In terms of this very short chapter with Gerald Gladstone, that's a clue. That's a clue that, oh my gosh.
This is chapter 32, everybody.
Yeah, very short chapter in which it's clear that Sarah Pisetsky's father has made a discovery that he finds very, very disturbing. And tragically, he ends up not being able to tell what it was because he dies.
He does, I'm afraid. So let's skip further into the book. There are 45 chapters in this book, everybody. Now, the chapters are a little longer in this book as opposed to into Missing Mum, but they're still punchy, they still pack a punch, and they're still intense. So let's go to, as I said, to the chapters 39 and 40. For me, this is you, Lynn Slaughter. You are teasing the reader with yet more twists and turns. Sarah Pisetsky is turning out to be a very, very, very interesting character. And I suspect this is you, the author, Lynn Slaughter, throwing the last throw of the dice before the final line, the end results. Care to comment?
Well, again, I think she is appearing to look more and more suspicious. And of course, sometimes something happens that leads you down a whole different path. And in this book, what happens is that the janitor, Gus, who works in the building of the ballet company and the studios, ends up dead. He ends up murdered. And then Caitlin really becomes suspicious that perhaps his death is connected. And then she begins looking into his finances and his phone calls and this and that. And then she starts to connect some very suspicious things toward this new suspect, which is the ex-wife of the artistic director.
I told you she's going to be a very interesting character, everybody.
Yeah.
So we've gone now to two bodies. This is what a good book needs to be. Now, Lynn, now that we've looked at the books, and now that you've taken a back step from dance, and you're now mainly focusing on writing, and of course your grandchildren. Do you love the process of writing and the books? And do you have any more stories to come? What's coming down the line?
Well, I do enjoy the process very much. I think it's been lovely to discover something else that I feel passionate about and find very rewarding and meaningful. Another place where I can go into the zone so to speak, and lose track of time and become very involved in what I'm doing. And yes, I have some other stories coming down the line. Interestingly, for the first time, I am working on a sequel to a book. All of my books have been standalones thus far. And in addition, this book has nothing to do with the performing arts, and that's the first. But it is a sequel to Miss Q. It's the same detective, Lieutenant Caitlin O'Connor,
Lieutenant.
who is faced with another complicated case. In this case, it's a murder of two-star football players whose bodies are left in a compromising position in the end zone of their high school football field. And Caitlin has to figure out who killed these players. And of course, is tentatively called Death in the End Zone. And of course, there are a lot of different possible suspects and different avenues that her investigation takes. And meantime, her personal life and Stan's personal life and the other folks who were in Miss Q are continuing to develop. So that's kind of what it's about. So that's coming down the pike.
And of course, I think it's only justified to say that the huge support you get from your husband, Alan, is important to you, isn't it?
Yes, yes, I'm very, very fortunate, John, because he really is. I call him my encourager in chief. He's always my first reader. He's always honest with me, and he's been extremely supportive of my writing. I'm really lucky.
Nothing to do with the fact, everybody, that he's a good cook and
Yes,
Lynn loves his cooking.
yes, I do love his cooking. I admit it. Oh boy.
Along with art and chocolate.
Yes.
So there you have it, everyone. This is Lynn Slaughter, and we've looked at two of her books. Now she's written six novels and one nonfiction. So go and have a look at her books. You can go to her web page and go and have a look. Where else can people get to your books from, Lynn?
Well, Amazon, of course, Barnes and Noble. Uh, and then if you go to my website, there are links to purchase the books. So that's basically where you could get them.
Lynn Slaughter from Kentucky in the United States of America. Thank you very much for coming to join me on my show and talk to me about your books and a little bit about yourself. It's been fascinating.
Thank you so much, John. I really enjoyed talking to you.
It's been a great pleasure. Lynn Slaughter, everybody.